Stephen A. Smith, ICE getting to conceal their identity is not a privilege other law enforcement have. Why do they get to do that? I love what Tom Homan says. Play the clip.
Identity. Law enforcement officials throughout this country don't get the license to do that. They have to walk up to you. They have to identify who they are. They have to make sure it's clear. An ICE agent getting to conceal their identity is not a privilege or a situation that other law enforcement officials have. Why should ICE agents have that?
Look, I don't pretend. I don't particularly like the mask either, but name another law enforcement agency that's over 1,000% attacks on them. And name another law enforcement agency whose spouses and children have been doxxed on social media and been attacked and bullied in churches and schools. These men and women put a gun on their hip and wear a Kevlar vest to go on the streets every day, look for the worst of worst, makes this country safer. Them wearing a mask, if that protects them and protects their families, then that has to be done. No one, you know.
He should stop and let him name them.
If they weren't wearing a mask during COVID, you got reported to the police and got arrested for it. These men and women are trying to protect themselves and their families. And again, I don't like the mask. I wish there wasn't need for it. But there's not another law enforcement agency dealing with the attacks that ICE is dealing with right now. Look, immigration enforcement, I've been doing it since 1984. It's always been controversial. It's always been emotional. But people need to remember the men and women at ICE, they don't hang their heart on a hook when they go to work. They're mothers and fathers too. They have children too. And they take very, very emotional things home with them every day. You know, I've done this for over 40 years.
You remember, he made such a great point there that I think a lot of people miss. Do you remember during COVID when the police would come in there and they used a lot of Gestapo tactics then, and we spoke out against it? But the left were defending them, weren't they? They were like, oh, yo, you got to haul them out of here. If they're not wearing a mask, you got to do this. You got to enforce this. You got to. Oh, they were all for the masks during COVID. They escort people out of the restaurant in a heartbeat, man. They were all for the masks back during COVID. Now you don't want masks, but yet you're going to dox these people and their families. John Fetterman, who knew? Who knew a dude could get a lobotomy and get some common sense? But he did. John Fetterman speaks out against this political demonization. And he says they're not trying to destroy the Constitution. Play the clip.
I grew up in a conservative part of Pennsylvania. And I grew up and I know and I love people that voted for President Trump. But they are not fascists. They're not Nazis. They're not trying to destroy the Constitution, those things. And that's part of another thing. I refuse to call people Nazis or fascists, or I would never compare anybody to Hitler and those things. And now that kinds of extreme rhetoric is going to continue. We're going to be more likely in resulting in extreme kind of outcomes and political violence and doing all these kinds of things like Charlie Kirk. For me, all I could say is like, let people grieve. Give people the space. I'm not going to use that terrible thing and that passive assassination to make my argument and try to put out my views. It's like, my God, you know, he's a father that had his neck blown out by a bullet. And now people have forgotten. President Trump was in my state, was shot in the head. And if that could you imagine where our nation would be if he was hit in the same way with Kirk? We really got to turn the temperature down. And we can agree to disagree on these kinds of things. But right now, shutting down the government, I just can't take it that.
And they're going to crucify him consistently. And I'm talking about people on his own side, the left, the squad, all of the progressive crazy Riris. They're going to be the ones who are going to crucify John Fetterman for saying such a thing. Because that's the deal. That's always going to be their deal. Let me just tell you something. Let me break this thing down for you in just a real clear, concise way. So John Fetterman comes out and he says, I'm not going to call people a Nazi. He said, these people are not fascists. They're not anti-Constitution. And he's right, 100%. He's right. We've already seen the extreme violence. We've already seen what happened to Charlie Kirk. We saw what happened to President Trump. We see what happened to various other lesser-known personalities, people that have been harmed, murdered, injured violently because of what they believed in. Let me just tell you something. Can I give you a couple of points? Disagreement isn't war. You can oppose ideas without declaring people who hold them your enemies. You don't have to make them your enemy. Because if you declare them to be your enemy, your ability to persuade somebody dies and the division's going to grow even bigger. Secondly, you know what? Name calling is always going to escalate conflict. I don't like to be called names. You don't like to be called names. You always want to fight back and defend yourself. But once one side calls the other Nazis or fascists, well, the other side's going to fire back, right? And it's going to get worse and worse. And the rhetoric is going to harden and the middle ground is eventually going to disappear. I used to say from the stage in front of a live audience all the time, I was like, the left and the right, they're two wings of the same bird. We got to get back into the heart of the bird instead of living out on the wings. I don't want to fly on the wings of the plane. I want to fly in the middle of the plane. That's where I want to live. But we don't have a middle anymore because we have galvanized ourselves against that idea of coming together. And third thing, overused words, they're going to lose their power every time. If everybody's a fascist, then nobody's a fascist. If everybody's a racist, then nobody's a racist. If you keep using those words, they mean nothing. And so when real evil does appear, you're going to be like the boy that cried wolf, and nobody's going to listen because the alarm's been rung too damn often. Another thing, let's call it number 4, okay? Demonizing people radicalizes people. The majority of people on the right, the people that own all the ammunition and all the things that go with it, they just wanted to be left alone. They really have. Most people, even the folks in the middle, they wanted to be left alone. And see, that's why, I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday. I won't say his name, David, but I was having a conversation with them about a politician there in Oregon and how they really want to avoid being labeled as MAGA. Oh, you're going to be labeled MAGA. You have no choice, because if you run with an R beside your name, you're going to be labeled MAGA because they have to demonize you. Well, here's the thing. You might as well go ahead and let them just demonize you, because the demonizing is going to radicalize them. Because when people feel condemned instead of heard, they don't moderate, they double down, because hostility breeds hostility. And here's another thing. Democracy cannot survive dehumanization. Free societies depend on trust. Free societies, you didn't hear what I said. I want to say it again. Free societies depend on trust. They depend on shared rules. I have to believe that you're going to keep the rules and I'm going to keep the rules. That's the only way we stay free. If you're out there breaking the rules and I'm keeping the rules, and see, that's where the society part starts to break down, Jimmy Kimmel, that's where the chaos comes from. So if I'm start treating opponents like subhuman, then both the trust and the shared values are going to go away. And here's the thing, and to your point there in the chat, it always backfires. Because labeling other people as evil might energize you in your base right now, but it will alienate all the moderates, the people in the middle, the people in the center, and it makes you look intolerant. And you get the John Fettermans of the world who come out with a little common sense, and eventually the same language is going to be used against you, and the same deeds could be used against you as well when the pendulum swings back. Folks, moral credibility, it matters. If you cry Hitler every time there's an election, your warnings are going to lose all the weight when a true threat arises, and truth demands restraint, folks. The cure, we got to get back to what our founding fathers wanted, and we never will. I don't think we will without a miracle from God. And that is, God has really got to break some hearts and open some eyes. But we got to get back to where we can debate instead of destroy, because you challenge bad ideas with reason, not with hatred. That's what Charlie Kirk did. You challenge bad ideas with reason, not with hatred. You reserve those moral absolutes for moral absolutes. Argue hard, but you do it without dehumanizing. So John Fetterman, when he says this, he's calling out Democrats for spreading extremist hate. He's not defending opponents. He was defending sanity. And a nation that talks like enemies soon's going to start acting like them. Politics is supposed to disagree. It's supposed to be the clash of ideas, but not the war of annihilation. Because here's what happens. If everybody on the left destroyed everybody on the right, and it was just the people on the left, and they had this country, guess what? They would find a way to disagree with each other again. Because the nature of humanity and its politics is always the clash of ideas. No one's always going to agree about how to run things. And civility is not weakness, it's the last defense against chaos. Apparently that chaos that Jimmy Kimmel says doesn't exist.